Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Caitlin Long, the founder and CEO of Custodia Bank, has now publicly argued that XRP has failed. I kid you not. How can anyone say that with a straight face in 2025? It boggles the mind. She also took it a step further, though, stating blatantly false things about XRP and the XRP ledger, which absolutely I'll be delving into here. Now, it's fascinating because she has never been somebody, because I've been following her for years and years and years. She's never struck me as somebody who is overtly tribal. I've never seen anything like this. She's never done anything I've seen to indicate that she suffers from XRP derangement syndrome. And perhaps she doesn't here. I have another theory, actually, which I'm going to share with you at the outset of the video here. Just a little speculation as to what triggered all of this nonsense here. But I have a suspicion that she doesn't suffer from XRP derangement syndrome. I think she just has some really bad opinions. I think she has some very, very bad takes on what is going on, and you'll see why. I have the transcription. You hear this? Hear that? That's a dead tree in my hands right here. That's called paper. And I transcribed this thing. She was so where this came from? It stemmed from a podcast, and she knew that the XRP army would not be too pleased. In fact, she even mentioned that. Yet still, this happened. So I'm very glad that I have my platform so that I can push back on just about everything that she frickin' said on this topic. Oh, sit back, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to pause and get some popcorn ready, kick your feet up, wiggle your toesy wowsies, get all comfy. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, now, Caitlin Long's Custodia Bank. I have mentioned them on my channel a handful of times, especially while the SEC v. Ripple lawsuit was really in the throw of things. Because under the Biden administration, the Federal Reserve repeatedly blocked Caitlin Long's Custodia Bank from gaining access to the Fed's payment system. Despite its fully reserved, by the way, and regulatory compliant structure. So it was nonsense. And, of course, this was widely seen as part of the broader anti-crypto stance by U.S. regulators. So it wasn't really a surprise. It was happening with the SEC and Ripple, as I just cited. But, of course, now with Trump elected and political tide turning, the U.S. is finally pro-crypto, literally for the first time in history, and so that does open doors ultimately for banks, including Custodia Bank here. But Custodia Bank went through years of irrational nonsense pushback, and I was certainly on her side. I was sympathetic to that, including on my channel here. Things have changed, obviously, so maybe it's pure jealousy. Maybe it's that Caitlin Long is viewing Ripple as a competitor now. Maybe that's actually what's going on here. You guys know this story. This is from July 2nd from Reuters. Ripple applies for U.S. national bank charter as crypto eyes next frontier. So Ripple's literally seeking to be a national bank here. And they're applying for a Fed master account, as cited here, would give it access to the Federal Reserve's payment infrastructure and allow it to hold its stablecoin reserves directly with the central bank. So that does mean that if granted, then RLUSD, Ripple stablecoin, which XRP powers on the XRP ledger anyway, that would literally be held by the federal government of the United States. And this is what Caitlin Long has been trying to get for Custodia Bank for years and years and years. And Ripple's coming in, and they're well positioned to get this. And I just wonder if she's speaking out now for the first time I'm aware of very negatively about Ripple and XRP because she now feels threatened by it. And I'll tell you this, that typically is the reason that people speak out and irrationally rip on Ripple and or XRP. It's because they feel threatened by it. That's the toxic Bitcoin maximalist approach. Now, I'm not claiming she's a maximalist, and this is obviously just speculation. I don't know why she's saying the things that she's saying here, which I'm about to share with you in great detail. All I know for sure is that it is nonsense, and it's really interesting that now for the first time she's speaking out the way she is, just so happens to be at the time where XRP is freaking dominating the crypto space. in a number of ways, and Ripple swooping in effectively as a competitor, if anything, here. Isn't that kind of interesting how that pans out? And so everybody's talking about this now, including me, because of this comment from my fellow XRP YouTuber, Crypto Eddie. So shout out and credit where it's due. I do believe she's the one that got all of this going. And I'm thinking that Caitlin Long probably had a bad day in the notification sections on X with all of this. But here's what Crypto Eddie wrote. The entire blockchain community should be deeply disappointed in the comments made by Caitlin Long in a podcast. She conflates the decentralized XRP ledger with a centralized digital asset company, Ripple. This is not leadership. This is ugly tribalism. And so again, your guess is as good as mine as to why she did this. And this podcast, I hadn't heard of the thing. It's called Gold Goats in Guns podcast. I'm not familiar with it. There it is on your screen right there. But let me share with you what she had to say. And I got a lot to say in response. Let me just say that. So I got the transcription here. So the host of this podcast said, it looks like Ripple, the Ripple network, is going to do the best for a variety of reasons. You're welcome to push back on me about that. I'm just reading what I see. So I'm not, I bring it up and everybody's like, you're shilling for Ripple. Okay, so let's pause a note there. It seems like the host is actually thinking Ripple and or XRP kind of makes sense, which is a perfectly fine take. And look, I don't need people to agree with me about XRP for me to like and respect them. If Caitlin Long genuinely believes what she's cited here, then she's just supremely ill-informed, and she should have known better than to speak about any of this on a podcast. That's one thing here. But you know, if she just has some bad takes in general, like that's people are entitled to have nonsense opinions that don't make sense. Like I can live with that. That's fine, and maybe that's part of what's going on here. So it could be a blend of those things. But here's what she actually said. She said, I don't mind that. I think it overstates how important that network is. Part of the problem is the banks have always been suspicious of it because it is a centralized network and it and the tokenomics are backwards. Okay, so let's already pause right there. Obviously, the XRP ledger is decentralized. Let me take a sip of water, 1 second. XRP ledger is obviously decentralized. There is no central point of failure. So she's incorrect about that. Now, she is here already conflating Ripple and XRP. Ripple obviously is a company. XRP is XRP is a cryptocurrency on the XRP ledger. It's a native asset utilizing distributed ledger technology. How could she not know this? And in 2025 was something, because mind you, she's highly intelligent. She's an ambitious, highly intelligent individual here. She's been in crypto since 2012, as cited on her profile here. 22-year Wall Street veteran. It's just amazing to hear something like this coming out of her mouth. This is completely ridiculous. And as far as the tokenomics, how are the tokenomics backwards? I've had so many discussions about this with various people that make this point. It's a nonsense point. The tokenomics, you know what happened here? XRP was created, right? And the creators of XRP gifted certain amounts, a big chunk to Ripple, and the founders of Ripple got chunks also. This is all publicly known. This wasn't done in some sort of shadowy back room. And you know what they got? When they got XRP, they got an asset that was worth literally $0.00. And this was known literally from the beginning. It was not traded. It didn't have a market value. There was no guarantee it would ever be worth even a penny. There's no guarantee it would be worth a fraction of a penny. It was just out there. All of the information was publicly known. And then people of their own accord decided that they were interested in trading it, giving it a market value. So how is it backwards if everything's out there in the open and people willingly choose to participate in the buying and selling of XRP? How would that be backward tokenomics? That doesn't make any sense. And furthermore, I will tell you this. Like, I was talking about this actually fairly recently. It came up for a completely different reason. But for instance, like Chris Larson, he was gifted XRP, if you want to call it that. It was basically part of a compensation package because they knew that with this being a nascent asset class, that there was a risk that the government could come after him. And so part of it was that hoping XRP might be worth something. They never could have known for sure it would be, a top 100 asset on the planet, which it actually is right now. But it did become that. And so it was hopefully gonna give him some sort of incentive to take on the risk, because you never knew for sure if like the FBI were gonna come break down the doors. Like an early Ripple employee, Bob Way, half jokingly stated that publicly. He's like, we didn't know in the early days. He's one of the first Ripple employees, and they're a tiny company. It's like, we didn't know if one day the federal government was gonna come kick in the door, and there was literally truth to that. And so yeah, Chris Larson got a whole bunch of XRP. But also, the concerns were warranted because years later, you know what happened? The SEC did sue Chris Larson personally, not just Ripple. They sued Chris Larson personally. And so what do you mean backwards tokenomics? Everything was done out in the open, and anybody that didn't like it didn't have to participate. And you know what? There actually are a lot of people that didn't like it and have critiqued it and haven't participated. And I say that's fine. But I found out about this. I knew the tokenomics in 2017, and I was like, oh, I do like this. This sounds good. Okay, so you've got a large crypto company that, if anything, is the largest cheerleader right now anyway for XRP that exists on the planet. That sounds good. And there's an actual use case for XRP when almost no coins are used for anything. That sounds good. There's nothing backwards about this. And then she says, one of the step back in creating these tokens platforms, the people who extracted money up front are never going to be trusted because everybody's going to look and think that, but anything that they do is an exit scam and try and dump on retail. Well, folks, that is obviously not true. The only people that are going to claim that anybody that's an executive having to do with Ripple or a creator of XRP, the only people that would claim that there was anything scammy there would be toxic Bitcoin maximalists and apparently Caitlin Long. Because you know who didn't claim a scam? Even the SEC, which literally sued Ripple, didn't claim that any of this was a scam. There was no fraud, there was no scam, nothing was done whatsoever. XRP has an open market price, everything's moving along, XRP's been trending up, and I'll tell you what, if this is a scam, I have to ask you, because you're saying this with a straight face, Caitlin Long, I have to ask you, how the hell is it that a scam like this, of this magnitude, could persist to the point where XRP today, 13 years after being created, XRP is number 3 in market cap? How is that persisting? Do you really think that every human the world over is so stupid that they can't sniff out an actual scam? These 7 companies that have publicly traded companies, since actually December, I think the first one was, 7 publicly traded companies have announced that they're holding XRP as a treasury reserve asset. Are you telling me that they couldn't sniff out that this is a scam? An exit scam, as you cite it, just to dump on retail? And if they're dumping on retail so hard, then how the hell is it number 3 in market cap? How the hell is it possible with all this dumping going on? Could it actually be that instead what's happening is that Ripple is selling little tiny baby boo bits of an asset that they rightfully own, based on a tiny percentage? It's a tiny fraction of a percentage of the volume that is transacted in any given time period. Maybe that's it. Yes, that actually is it. And that's publicly known information too. You can Google this stuff. How can you say any of this with a straight face? It just does not make sense. Nobody that's legit actually thinks anything that you just said, Caitlin Long. Nobody of repute. Nobody. You only have the toxic Bitcoin maximalists and ill-informed idiots that are saying stuff like this. It does not make sense. So I can only surmise that you're saying this because now Ripple is a threat, I guess. What else is it? Well, seriously, what the hell else is it? You're spewing at, and it only gets worse. Stick with me, folks. This goes way off the rails. Stick with me because this gets pretty disastrous here. And then she says, the most effective tokenization platforms are the ones where there was no money up front or very little money up front. And that's Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's really that simple. I don't think you're ever going to get the trust because all of that money that got raised up front. That was the first of the ICOs in their case. And they've been at this longer than almost anybody else. Okay, there's only one problem with that. That could not be further from the truth. XRP, I can't believe we haven't have to say this in 2025. Like, does she have access to the internet? Could somebody find out if she has access to the internet? Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she just doesn't. Is this somebody else running this account? Because I will tell you this, she is a ghost on this. She has she has chosen to not reply to anything having to do with this. She's decided very clearly she's going to let the storm pass here. But there was no ICO. There was no initial coin offering for XRP. In fact, the XRP ledger was completely built out by the time. So when it was launched, it just worked. Now, on the other hand, Ethereum, this is what's so funny about it, because she said that Bitcoin and Ethereum didn't have ICOs. Ethereum, they were the first ICO. I believe they were literally the first. It was an ICO. I'm pretty damn sure it was the actual first one, though. And that's why this is hilarious to me. So all of that money was collecting to build out Ethereum. Literally, it didn't exist when they started collecting money 10 years ago. With XRP, though, it was 100% functional at inception. It just was. They weren't collecting money from outside investors. There was no ICO. There literally was no ICO. How do I have to say this in 2025? And she is not a stupid person. Like, why is she saying this stuff then? It's just completely ridiculous. And then she said, and they haven't made a lot of progress. Oh yeah, here we go. There we go. XRP's a failure, guys. And now, what did they try to do? Instead of trying to sell that into the banking industry, they're getting their own regulated financial institutions and trying to issue a stablecoin. So that's kind of, in some ways, of an admission that the base layer blockchain didn't get the adoption that they were looking for. Okay, first of all, they're not trying to launch a stablecoin. They did launch a stablecoin. It happened in December. Where have you been, Caitlin Long? What are you even actually talking about here? And then launching a stablecoin on a blockchain is now some sort of admission that that the blockchain is. What are you talking about? Does that mean that there are stablecoins on Ethereum? Does that mean that Ethereum has failed? Is it because you're propping up Ethereum here, and she does later actually in this transcription also. Has Ethereum failed? There's stable coins on there, or is it just that Ripple has failed? Are you saying that Ripple's failed because they just keep getting bigger and bigger and having success after success after success? Or are you just talking about XRP as a bridge currency? Because what you'll see, and she speaks more about this in just a second here, but if the argument is actually just that, no, it's XRP, it's just not replacing Swift. Okay, if that's the argument, and they've already for sure failed, and you're saying it's because of stablecoins, then let me ask you, how come Swift still exists? For XRP to have failed, shouldn't something have overtaken Swift, or does Swift just exist forever? Like, what are you even... Because the argument that she ends up making is that the stablecoins are doing a job that XRP can't do. And she's arguing even Ripple knows that. That's why Ripple launched a stablecoin, because XRP just can't do the job. Never mind you that in almost all the payment flows today, in 2025 anyway, XRP is used as the primary bridge currency, and only in corridors where it doesn't make sense for regulatory reasons, like any corridor touching the United States, would they use a stablecoin like RLUSD. This is publicly available information. Like, why do we have to have a discussion? This is why we cannot have nice things, folks. This is why we cannot have nice things. This is completely absurd. So, there you go. XRP failed as a bridge currency, I guess because reasons. Ripple launching a stablecoin, no, it couldn't. So you could not possibly perceive of a reality where Ripple just wants to become like the go-to for all things crypto, because they've been doing that for custody also. Did you not notice that? Does that mean they failed? So anytime they do anything else to grow out and branch out and do something else, that means that they failed. And the first thing that they try to do, even though they found success to this point. None of this is a coherent argument. And again, if this is the case, even if that were the case, and say, okay, let's just pretend that Caitlin Long's right. Ripple decided that they can't find success in defeating Swift with XRP, so now they're going to try it with a stablecoin, right? Does she not understand how technology works? The stablecoin on the XRP ledger literally requires XRP for every single transaction. That's the way it's coded. So even if that happened, it still couldn't happen without XRP. XRP still wins, and money keeps flowing in because investors will understand that you can't have RLUSD, which is functionally useful, if you don't have a successful XRP. So the more people that want to throw money into crypto, a certain percentage is always going to make it to XRP. So even then her argument falls apart. There are like a bazillion ways that you can slice and dice this thing. It is not hard. Did she spend any time thinking about what she said publicly here? Excuse me. I don't know. She seems to have spent some amount of time thinking about it. It's just astonishing here. For an intelligent person, no less. Like, it's just, why is she doing this? And then she said, now, I will also say that by the administration was a big part of that, right? So force them offshore and saying, you can't basically do the SEC, again or sue the SEC again for trying to use that as the, because I know this sounds weird, but you know how humans talk, and then there's like, you start a sentence, but then you're like, no, scratch that, and you start talking, but then when the human's saying it, it's in real time, you can understand it. But then when somebody reads it back, it sounds like garbled mush. That's what's happening here, just so you know. I'm just reading as is. So force them offshore and saying, you can't basically do the SEC again for trying to use them as that, because it was the obvious case, since it was the first ICO to say that that was an illegal securities offering, right? And going after that. And that hamstrung them. Again, it's not an ICO. Even the SEC didn't claim that there was an ICO. Like, come on, this is ridiculous. Yeah, hamstrung them, yes. The federal government of the United States absolutely slowed down Ripple, and they slowed down your bank too. And that kind of sucks donkey balls. And instead of rallying together, you're doing this nonsense. Thanks for nothing. And then she says, it didn't hurt Ripple as much as the Fed hurt us, right? Oh, well, poor little Caitlin Long. Did the big bad government hurt you worse than Ripple? I don't know. Let me ask, did you spend $200 million defending yourself, Caitlin Long? No, you didn't, because Ripple did. And all that was at stake was the entire crypto asset class, because if things went poorly in that case, every single altcoin in existence, in the United States at least, would have suffered the same fate ultimately. That's what was at risk. Because if XRP was a security, so was everything else. Everything except for Bitcoin. But no, the Fed, it hurts you more. Hurt you more, Caitlin Long. Oh, okay. This is not reality that she's living in. And then she says, everybody who was targeted by the Biden administration was hurt to varying degrees. But I'm acknowledging that, for me, for the XRP army that's going to come after me for saying something, I think, rational about it, that it's not going to take over. It's not. Okay. XRP's not going to take over. What are you even talking? Does she actually think that XRP can only be used for one thing? And I have to ask, why is the standard so much lower for Bitcoin and so much higher for XRP? You ever ask that? You ever wonder about that? People like her will just acknowledge that Bitcoin, it's the pet rock of crypto. It doesn't do, stuff. Doesn't really do much of anything. It's a store of value, so that's the narrative. It's gold 2.0. That's the narrative. All it does is it stores value. There you go. It doesn't have to do anything else. It just wins. It just wins because it is. It's just because it was the first mover. Why is the bar so low for Bitcoin but then so high for XRP? Given that XRP was built to be a better version of Bitcoin, which it certainly is, what's this expectation that it now has to replace Swift effectively by being the primary bridge currency for foreign exchange transactions? Because I will tell you this, I don't know for sure big picture what's going to happen with Ripple and positioning XRP as a bridge currency. It's working very well right now. I can tell you that. Nobody can see into the future though. But I will tell you this, and I've always known this. Even if Ripple failed here, XRP still fucking works. It just does. It was designed to be a better version of Bitcoin. It has achieved that because, frankly, that was a pretty low bar. It settles in real time, and the transactions are so cheap for XRP, fractions of a penny, they might as well be free. It turns out people value that. Like, just full stop right there, people already value that. And it's been around so long that it just is. It's not the first mover, so it doesn't have first mover advantage, but it practically does. It's one of the first cryptos ever created. Turns out the market values that. That's why it's number 3 in market cap. But then there's more. But wait, there's more. Billy Mays here with another exciting product, right? But wait, there's more. You can do other stuff with it. Companies literally use it in payment flows. I've been reporting on this stuff for years and years and years, and we found out all sorts of companies that were utilizing XRP for various purposes. In amicus briefs filed in the SEC v. Ripple case. There are all sorts of firms that popped out of the woodworks we otherwise wouldn't have even known existed that were doing stuff. It also turns out that you can tokenize assets on the XRP ledger, like T-bills and money market funds, which have been tokenized. Even gold. Gold has been tokenized on the XRP ledger. Excuse me, I'm not sure where this cough came from. Anyway, so even if XRP somehow failed as a bridge currency, which it sure as hell is not to this point, the market has already decided it's valuable for multiple reasons. Even just doing what Bitcoin should have been able to do, even just that's enough for XRP to persist. It just is. So this idea that, again, she said here, that it failed here. What are you actually talking about? Because she said here again, if it were going to take over, it would have taken over a long time ago. Is that right? Well, even if she were, and look, again, even if she were just talking about XRP as a bridge currency and what Ripple's doing, are you sure about that? So, because stablecoins sure as hell haven't taken over Swift, does that mean that Swift is just there forever? Because it didn't happen like snap of a finger? What? Can you imagine if people took the, and actually people did, there actually are people that, people took that type of mentality, that type of approach, in what I guess they would have called analytical thinking, towards Amazon? Can you imagine saying that about Amazon in the 90s? They're like, oh, well, what are you talking about? It's just, I mean, you got money flowing in, but you're not even turning a profit here. You're only selling books, your Amazon books. You don't even sell anything else. Like, what's going on here? Well, the people that made those arguments, their comments aged like a fine milk. And Amazon lost money for years and years and years and years and years. For most of its existence, it lost years. But it ultimately turned a profit. So anybody that was a naysayer, they were just wrong. And so if you're going to say that, XRP has failed, or it's failing even specifically for this use case because it hasn't gone whatever timeline you think it should have, and if it's going to happen, it would have happened by now. That's the same type of bullshit comments that people are saying about Amazon. If it were going to work and it could have been profitable, it would have happened by now. It's all going to fall apart. People made those arguments, and they were wrong. Either way, XRP already has a foothold here. It really does just work, and people value what it offers. They value its attributes, and it does offer utility. None of this rings true. Just none of it. I'm very shocked to see this from her. And it's just out of nowhere. And that's why I can only guess it has something to do with the fact that Ripple's now, she's not viewing Ripple as a competitor. What else would it be? I don't know. And then she said, and now they've actually pivoted to issuing US dollar stablecoins on the network, which kind of tells you that they understand that the base layer network is not going to become the base layer of, replacing Swift. And part of it is because of those tokenomics. Folks, so it failed, but if they just had the tokenomics the right way, if we just had that clunky, slow mining like Bitcoin had, then nobody would care. And then it would have replaced Swift by now. Oh, okay. Nothing else has fully replaced Swift. So is her argument genuinely that it's just going to persist and there's nothing to replace it and it can just stay as it is? Like, what is she actually saying? And frankly, I'm not even convinced that and I haven't been. I go back, listen to my videos for years and years. I'm not saying Swift is completely going to go away for a number of reasons not worth getting into for the purposes of this video. But Ripple can get a certain percentage of that. Like, I've always said, even if they just get a certain percentage of that, which they are so far, like, that's still a win. I mean, if there are businesses that are like remittance firms literally utilizing Ripple payments, and which includes XRP as a bridge currency, and it just keeps growing, even if she doesn't like the pace, I don't care if she doesn't like it, that's still success. That's a business success. And rather than rooting that on, she's tearing it down and saying, well, they're just admitting it didn't work. Except for it doesn't make any sense. And what, banks aren't going to adopt it because reason? Does she not understand that the banks don't even have to hold XRP themselves to utilize Ripple payments? Does she just not know this stuff? Like, they don't care. Who would care about the tokenomics? Even if you're a bank or remittance firm, why the fuck would you care when you don't have to even hold XRP to utilize that? It doesn't make any sense. Does she really just not know this stuff? Man, she needs to do some damn research then. And then she says, but I think part of the reason Ethereum is running, the price has run a lot. It's because when the U.S. Treasury decides which permissionless network is going to token I think tokenize. I see bills on tokenize. She's talking about tokenizing T-bills here. And by the way, of course, not announce this. I'm speculating based on something that I heard this is coming. Okay, so again, let's see what happens here. There are already T-bills on the XRP ledger. There are firms that can and have already tokenized them. So I've never believed that it's just going to be one blockchain that gets 100% market share. Like, that doesn't make sense. So if Ethereum gets some, and maybe Hedera, all sorts of other chains, cool. That's fine. Although I'm still having a little bit of trouble seeing why, in particular, with a slower, more costly chain like Ethereum, why that would be the go-to. Because you gotta understand, like, the XRP ledger, it is purpose-built specifically for this, and it's really good at this. Anytime it's something to do with payments, which is what we're talking about when you're talking about tokenizing financial assets, it really is just fantastic about it with that. And so, fine, if other firms are going to choose other chains, like, I have no issue with that. Let time play out, and we'll see if they made the best or just a somewhat okay decision, whatever. But if there are users on various chains, it does make sense that assets would get issued on multiple chains, especially right now in 2025, while this is all still getting worked out and markets are still figuring things out. Like, that's just part of the growth process. That's fine. But then she says, where's the next part? She says, it's because when the U.S. Treasury decides which permissionless network is going to tokenize T-bills on, and by the way, of course, they did not. Oh, wait, that's the part. She says, I'm speculating something that I heard this is coming. Okay, and then she says, they're not going to use Ripple. Okay, and again here, she's conflating Ripple with XRP. So which does she actually mean? I don't fucking know. Then she says, they're going to use Ethereum. They're maybe going to use Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin layer 2s are not mature enough for something like that, right? Okay. I can't take this seriously. I can't take this seriously. The world has already decided she's wrong. That's why XRP is number 3 in market cap. She is wrong. At some point, Caitlin Long, I tell you got to look inward and ask, what is it that I don't understand? This XRP thing, I think it has no value. It doesn't work. The tokenomics are bad. It's a scam. It's an exit scam. I'm Caitlin Long. These are the things that I've publicly said I believe. How come it just keeps persisting? Why can't everybody else see that it's a scam and an exit scam and the tokenomics are bad and it doesn't get used for anything? If I'm Caitlin Long, at some point, don't I look inward and wonder, wait a minute, maybe I'm the one that doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about? When do you look inward and ask, what the hell do I not get? Because there's a whole bunch of things, and I just shared a few of them here in this latest Moon Lambo Hot Jam, but my God. And so she says, to wrap this up, she says, they've got to think like a bank, and the most mature blockchain platform by far for this type of issuance is Ethereum. Okay. Cool story, bro. Just, again, I'm not tribal. I would like to see all sorts of stuff tokenized on all sorts of different chains. I really would. And I'm glad that is happening. And I hold a ton of different cryptocurrencies. I do. XRP is my largest holding, so fine. Call me biased, but I want the whole ecosystem to thrive. What is this tripe she just spewed all over the place? It just doesn't make any sense. And my fellow XRP YouTuber, Jungle Inc. here, I think he had a pretty good take here. He shared this post, and he said, Ripple is living Caitlin Long's nightmare. And I'll pause to note, I think he meant dream. Ripple is living Caitlin Long's dream, just through the context, because Ripple's doing what Caitlin Long wishes she could do. Anyway, so then he says, while she's been begging for a Fed master account since 2020, Ripple is now gliding toward one with institutional support, real regulatory momentum, and a stablecoin to match. All that time spent lobbying, suing, and talking about fair access, and now Ripple walks in with the infrastructure and partners the Fed actually wants. This isn't personal. It's just what happens when you build real pipes instead of preaching from the sidelines. The system isn't fair. It's not supposed to be. It rewards winners. And right now, Ripple's winning. That's a good post. That's right. That is a good post. And Ripple's winning, and she's posting this at the same time Ripple's winning and has effectively become a competitor, especially assuming this especially goes forward anyway, with the Fed master account and the national bank charter. New competitor. She's just trash talking a competitor. That's what it looks like to me, folks. I can't take any of this crap seriously, though. It's just like the stupidest thing she's saying. Like, I know she's smart and she's informed about all sorts of stuff. I get that. But she sounds like somebody that's new to crypto with what she just said on this podcast. That's what I would expect from somebody who doesn't know a damn thing. How? This is why we cannot have nice things. I'm telling you, folks. You tell me what you think. I'm gonna stop my yapping here. But wow, it's just moments like this make me so glad that I have this platform and I'm running this XRP-centric YouTube channel so I can just push back on all these terrible ideas and terrible perspectives that just do not make any sense and are not grounded in reality. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.